Cool. So we're not talking about sharks, but maybe we'll talk about some perception that people have. Cool, so usability versus security, this endless battle between these two. And in this talk, we're going to see if we can build products that are both secured, but also has a good usability. So I'd like to start this talk talking about password strength. And if you own a web app or a mobile app, why you should even care about your user's password strength? Well, probably the #1 problem in security today is data breaches. And data breaches, so research that was done just 2 years ago found that there are more than 2.7 billion records of users for sale on the internet with more than 20 million passwords. All in all, this costs $2.1 trillion yearly. Well, and data breaches happens to all the companies, from smaller ones to bigger ones, like Facebook, Microsoft, Uber, almost every company. And if it happened to them, it can also happen to you. Now, I'm sure you all hire the best security expert in the world today, but sometimes, shit happens. And when it happens, the clock starts ticking. And probably the only thing that can differentiate between a user that their account has been compromised and their data is stolen, and a user that is still safe for some time, is the strength of their passwords. So you might tell yourself now, well, that's an easy problem to solve, right? We can just force our users to use very strong passwords and maybe force them to use two-factor authentication and just adding more and more means of security. But there's a problem with that, because the more means of security you add, your site becomes more complicated. You add more steps to your registration. So just think about the last time when you try to register to a site. So you put all your details, right? Then you put the password, and the site tells you this password is not strong enough. So you put a stronger password, and then the site sends you an email. So you go and you need to validate your email. And then they send you an SMS, just grab the code, and your phone is in another room. So you go to the other room, and well, I just wanted to see what this site do for me. Why do I need to do all these things? And you can find maybe the balance in advising the user. Instead of forcing them to do all these things, maybe advising them to use strong means of security. So anyway, you don't want to compromise totally on security, so you don't want to be on the ignore, you don't want to ignore security. You want to be somewhere between the advice and the require. And you can also think about more creative ways to be somewhere between them. For example, you can maybe some of your features are very sensitive, so only for them, you can require your users to use very strong password or two-factor authentication. Another example is maybe let your users finish the registration and only then try to push them and maybe send them mails or notifications about strengthen their passwords. So this is what we do at Dropbox. We try to stay somewhere between the advice and require. But at Dropbox, we also have our B2B product, which is Dropbox for Teams. So teams can buy Dropbox for their employees. So the employees can share files with each other or collaborate on content. And these teams also have an admin, most likely the IT admin. And these admins want to configure the settings or configure the security for their team, for their employees. So this is what our competitors has. So in this panel, you can see that admins can configure the number of required characters for their employees. And then they can configure the number of special characters. And if you want special characters in your users' passwords, you can require users to use lower or uppercase, and then the number of lower up. As you can see, many configurations, many drop-downs, many checkboxes. And at Dropbox, we try to simplify things. So we thought, well, can we build something simpler than that? And in order to do that, we try to ask the 5 whys. So 5 whys, if you're not familiar with that, the technique started in Japan in the car manufacturing, like many things, and which, when a defect was found in the pipeline, the manager asked the employees 5 times. And I know you heard before that you can ask infinite number of times why. Japanese say only 5 times. So just 5 times the managers ask the employees 5 times why, until you understand the root cause of a defect. And you can also use this in the product world. When a customer asks you to build them something, you ask them 5 times why, until they understand the real need. So let's make an example. So I'll be the admin. So as you see, I have the admin cap here. And this admin worked for a company called Hogwarts. Don't know if you heard about this company. So yeah, so this admin came to us and asked us, okay, Dropbox, I saw what your competitors do. I want to have like the exact same panel. Okay, we asked them, really? Like, why do you need that? Well, obviously, I want to force my users to use long password with special characters and number and so on. Really? You want that? Well, like, why do you need that? Well, obviously, I want more control over my users' passwords. Oh, you want more control over users' passwords? Well, why do you need that? Well, I want them to use strong passwords. Oh, now we understand. You want them to use strong passwords, but why do you need that? Well, to reduce the risk of account hijacking. Oh, okay. Then again, like, why do you need that? Well, I want to keep my team's files safe. So you see where we started from. Like the admin came to us and asked us, I want you to build the exact same thing as your competitor has. And we finished like understanding the real problem that they're facing. They want to keep their team files safe by forcing the users to use strong passwords. So if we want to build this, we first need to understand what a strong password is. So I put here 2 passwords, and I want to make a short poll, just raising your hand. Which password is better? So who thinks the first password is better? The troubadour with some special characters and numbers, and the blue giraffe plays ball. So who thinks the troubadour password is better? Cool. Who thinks the blue giraffe plays ball is a better one? Cool. Well, some 50-50. Well, so what do you do when you don't know the answer to something? Well, you go to Google. So Google, let's ask Google, what's considered to be a good password, right? And the answer Google gave me is simple. You have to have 6 characters or more, mixed cases of upper and lower case, numbers, and special characters. So I put these 2 passwords into a table to see which one has more elements. And as you can see, the troubadour has all the elements, while the blue giraffe plays ball has none of them. Cool. So we can call the winner easily, right? It's the troubadour. But let me remind you a story. Probably all know Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. And no, it's not this Alibaba, it's this one. And Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, you probably all know the familiar, like the famous password from there, Open Sesame. And like Open Sesame didn't have any special characters or number, upper, lowercase. Like it existed long before we can even think about it, long before computers even existed. So there must be a better definition for a good password, right? So what do you do when Google doesn't give you the answer? And there's a hint here. Webcomics, right? Webcomics has the answer to everything. So personally, I love this webcomics called XKCD, and I found like probably the best definition for a good password there. A good password must only have 2 elements. It has to be hard to guess, but still easy to remember. That's actually all you need for a good password. So let's start with hard to guess. How do you estimate the hard to guess? So hard to guess is the number of guesses required to crack the password. That one is easy, right? So let's do a naive estimation. So the number of guesses required to crack a password is the cardinality in the power of the length. Ooh, some spooky math. Well, don't worry about that. We'll just make an example. So the cardinality is the range that you have to pick like a letter. So in the English alphabet, you have 26 options, 26 lowercase letters, if you only use lowercase letters. But if you also use uppercase letters and special characters and numbers, you have 95 options. So if we have a password with 6 letters, and we only use lowercase letters, so the number of guesses required to crack this password, for the first letter, it would be 26 options. For the second one, 26 options. The third one, 26 options. So you'll need 26 to the power of 6 to guess this password. But if you also use special characters and number and uppercase letters, it will be 95 to the power of 6 guesses. So if you try to crack this password in a ratio of 1,000 guesses per second, the first one will take you 15 days. Well, if you also use numbers and uppercase and special characters, it will take you 140 years. So now you understand where all these rules come from, right? The more cardinality you use, the longer your password is, the stronger your password will be. But as I said, this is just a naive estimation, right? Like, we're all humans. We're not robots. So I can tell you that at least for me, just remember 8 random characters with number and special characters is almost impossible. And probably that's also true for most of the people. Because what most of the people do is they use some patterns, like here. So let's do a more realistic, let's take a more realistic approach and try to estimate this password. So troubadour is just a word in English, uncommon words. So there are about 2 to the power of 16 words like this one. So just uppercase the first letter. You have 2 options, either you do it or not. And then there's some letter that has been deleted. So lit, if you're not familiar with that, it's just a language, like a graphical language, where you take an O, turn it into a 0. And A becomes 4, E becomes 3. And many people do it. They think it's very sophisticated. Well, in reality, it's very predictable with computers, right? If you have an O, you have 2 options. Either you O or 0. So computers can guess it very easily. So there are 3 letters like this in troubadour. Each one has 2 options. Then a special character. There are about 16 common special characters. A number, there are 10 digits. And then the order between the 2, you have 2 options. So all in all, if you sum it all up, you'll get that this password can be cracked in 2 to the power of 28 guesses, which is only 3 days in this ratio. Let's take a look on the other passwords, Blue Giraffe Baseball. So it's 4 pretty random words in English. Each one is pretty random, also, is pretty common. So we have 2 to the power of 11 common words in English. So when we sum it all up, we get that this password, you'll need 2 to the power of 44 guesses to crack it. 550 years, yeah, more than a lifetime. So this password is much harder to guess. But what about easy to remember, the second element? Well, obviously the trombone is easier. Or, sorry, it was a troubadour. And then I listed a few letters. Who remember which one? And there were special characters and a number. And honestly, I've done this talk a few times before. Honestly, I have no idea what was the original password. No idea. And what about the second password? Was the Blue Giraffe plays ball. It's easy to remember. So now you know which password is actually better. So let's take a look at another password. Let's do a real world example. Password 123456 exclamation mark. A very weak password, right? Password is the first word in any password dictionary. 123456 is the second one. And then the exclamation mark, again, you have 16 options. So you don't need all this estimation. This password is very weak. It will take you probably seconds to crack. So let's take this password and try to put it into the most popular sites today in the world. Let's put it first maybe in Gmail and see how Gmail estimates this password. Well, as you see, very strong. I get full bar. Google tells me this is a very strong password. Well, maybe Facebook? Nah, also Facebook. This is a strong password. I tried Twitter, maybe, I don't know, maybe they're better. But I got full bar. You can go better than this, right? And in Apple also, they give me the reasons, which maybe doesn't give, so yeah. So all the popular sites told me this is a very strong password. It's quite surprising, maybe even shocking to see how they wrongly estimate password. And also maybe I could say even misleading users to think that they have strong password, while in reality, as you can see, they have a very weak ones. So what we can do, if we only have a tool that you put your password and it breaks into the dictionary words or some patterns and all that, well, we do have one. ZXCVBN, so it's a library. It was built in Dropbox a few years ago by Dan Wheeler. It's open source under MIT, so you can do whatever you want with it. And it has more than 10K stars, so it's pretty popular today. Yeah, and how to use it, it's pretty simple. Just npm install ZXCVBN, then require, and you call the function with your password, and you get all the results you need. Breaks the password into patterns and gives you the scores and everything you need. Cool, so now, after we understand our user's problem, and after we have the tool to solve it, instead of building our admins or customers, building all these panel with all the checkboxes and drop downs and many decisions that they need to make. Instead of building this, we build that. That's all you need. So the admin can go to this screen, and they only need to make one decision. Do you want to require users to use strong password or not? That's all they need, right? And it was actually a win-win-win situation for everyone. It was a win for us, developers, designers, product managers, because doing something like this, as you can see, only one dropdown, you don't need a lot of designers to do it. Implementation is very easy. You just call the function, get back the results. And you don't have all the edge cases where all the checkboxes and dropdown. It was very easy to build this one, right? It was also a win for our admins because they have a simple tool now. Instead of going to a panel where they need to make lots of decisions and need to see all the checkboxes and dropdowns, the decision here is very clear, right? And it was a win for our end users because now they get a powerful tool. So instead of require them use some special characters and numbers which are not helpful, they have a tool that really helps them to use strong passwords. Cool, so I guess it's now time to wrap up. So what did you talk about passwords? So why you should care? Well, it's the last line of defense for your users, for your site. What is a strong password? So a strong password has only two rules. It needs to be hard to guess, but easy to remember. That's all. How to estimate? So we saw a way to manually estimate your password if you want, but there's a tool for that to do everything automatically, so probably just use the tool. And what did we learn about security? More importantly, what did we learn about security versus usability? So the first thing is don't automatically build everything your customers ask you to. And sometimes, they're just asking you, build me the same thing as your competitors has. Sometimes they are still stuck in some perception that they have. They need all the list of rules, or for example, they think that sharks will just eat you when they see you. Well, sometimes, these are just wrong concepts. So instead of building them what they want, build them what they need. And you can understand what they need asking the 5 whys, or more if you want. Just asking them an infinite number of times, why, until you understand what they really need. Also, when you can, use smart algorithms. If it's maybe machine learning or AI, instead of letting your customers do typing many things down, if you can automatically grab things from the internet using API, or you can take all the factors into consideration, use algorithm that makes all the calculation, just use it. Probably the most important thing is early conversation between developers and designers and product managers. Try to do this conversation early as you can. So any designers here, by the way? Raise your hand, any designer? So if I have one tip for designers is try to talk or communicate with your developer as early as you can. As you can see, sometimes engineers, developers come up with a very technical solution that can make your UX or UI much simpler. Any developers here? I guess probably most of the people here. So if I need to give one tip for developers is just don't be a code monkey. Don't just get tasks and implement everything. Just try to really understand because I know some developer who told me, okay, my work is to implement things that designers are giving me. And I don't care about design, I don't care about product, I'm just implementing everything that they've given. This is probably not a good way. Try to really understand the design, try to understand the product. More importantly, try to understand your customers. Because if you think about it, probably it's the wrong thought to think about it as a pipeline, where research start doing their work, then they hand off to the product, then product decides what to build, and then when they finish, they hand off to the designer designs, then they hand off to the engineers. So instead of thinking this as a pipeline, think this is a one team that we work together from the very first steps of the product, and we build the product together. This is probably the only way that you can build products that are both secured, but also has a good usability. Oh, jumps. Oh, stuck. Okay. So thanks very much to XKCD for inspiring this talk, and thanks for Dan Wheeler who built this algorithm, and thank all of you for sharing your time with me. It's a great pleasure to be here today. And if you want, you can ask questions now or just ask me in LinkedIn with the QR code here. That's all. Yeah, you have some questions.
Okay, thanks so much, Alon. So there are a couple of very interesting questions on here. Okay, the first two, they're kind of, I think, similar to each other. So Anonymous asks, would you recommend using a database of breached passwords to compare the user's password to? And then Daniel asks, checking a password against a library required sending the password in clear text to the service provider. Doesn't that impose a security risk?
So this ZXVPN algorithm, you can just download like all the library, so it comes with a list of all the old passwords. Yeah. So you probably answered both questions, right?
Yeah. So you don't have to send it anywhere.
Yeah, just like everywhere is local. Yeah.
And would you recommend that? Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah.
Okay. Question answered.
Why not?
All right. So Benjamin says, thanks. From now on, I will use Blue Giraffe Plays Ball for all my passwords. Good idea.
That's a great password.
Similarly, Anonymous wants to know, what's your favorite password?
My favorite password, yeah, Blue Giraffe Plays Ball. I use it for all my sites, but actually, like, no, but really, this is like, if you're like, as a user, if I can give you a hint, just use like password manager. Don't use like long passwords or complicated passwords. Just like, we have like a solution, as a users, we have a solution for that. Use like password manager, either it's like 1Password, LastPass, or I don't know if you know, but Dropbox also launched like our password manager, so just use that. Need to make some ads. Yeah, the best one. Yeah. Forget about what I said. Just use the Dropbox one.
Okay, good answer. My favorite password, by the way, this is from an Edward Snowden talk, is Margaret Thatcher is 110% sexy.
Wow.
I will stick with you. All right. So yeah, Anonymous again wants to know, how long does it take to crack a WPA2 password with a length of 8 numbers and surf in free Wi-Fi or sniff passwords? This sounds like an exam question.
Yeah. I know. I need some time to like check it.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a question. I'm sorry that I'm just going to squeeze in. So all this like guessing password, trying it out, the time that we need to crack a password.
Yeah.
Do you think this will change with quantum computing? And do you think then how we define a strong password, do you think it will change?
I guess so. I don't know a lot about quantum computing. I guess it will change like all the world of security. We need like better like security, like means probably a better authentication, better SSL and all that. Yeah. Yeah, so it'd probably be like much easier to crack passwords with like quantum computing, but who knows?
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. So, here's a question. I think it kind of is similar. Yeah. Do you see a solution on the horizon that can replace the need for passwords completely?
Oh, I've heard some solutions.
There are some solutions. Like
yeah, I heard some of them. Like probably fingerprint. Like there are better ways. I hope to see more and more like solutions. I heard some talks about it, but like it probably takes some years. So we'll still stick with passwords for the next couple of years.
But if you have an iPhone, you use like Face.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you have like better means for security, but still like some sites still use passwords.
Yeah, cool. All right, actually we have time for one more question. I'm just going to check if someone from the audience, yes.
We see a lot of sites starting to use authentication with like an email that you get where you click a link and then you're automatically authenticated, so you don't actually have a password.
Okay, so you get a mail and then you need to validate the email?
Basically, I go on website.com, I put my username, I click login, they send me a mail, I click on the link and then it redirects me to my profile page. So basically every time I get a password emailed.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like if it works for users, I don't know, like ask people if it's very convenient for them, like getting a mail, they need to press the email. I don't know. I'd say that I'm not sure. Like for me, it's more convenient just like putting your password. And, today you have password managers, so yeah. For me, just using a password manager is easier. But I mean, like, if it works for you, I'll be happy to hear about this.
Right. So we're at the end of the Q&A. Thank you very much for your questions. We're going to take a 20-minute.